Yo, what is up, y'all? My name is Rob Donaldson, and welcome back to another edition of Rob's Best Bets. And in this episode, we are once again talking about college hoops, baby, here on Tuesday, November 11th. And we have a really fantastic slate of games. And as I'm recording this, we are still pending out one 3-unit bet on UCLA. We will see what happens there in terms of our profit for Monday. We're going to turn a profit in college basketball no matter what, but it would be really nice to add just that extra cherry on the top. And I do think that, hey, as it currently stands, I'm very happy with how things have been going. And as you guys can see, our numbers have been very strong 1 week into the college basketball season. And I'm so excited to be talking about college basketball here on Tuesday as well. But with all that being said, y'all, let's take a second to shout out today's sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. And if you haven't already signed up using promo code ROBDFB, I highly recommend you guys do so. But with all that being said, let's go ahead and jump into these picks here on Tuesday, November 11th. All right, first up, we are taking a look at a matchup here between Iona and UMKC. And when you're looking at this matchup here, UMKC kind of feels like a team that, one, needs a serious rebuild and doesn't really feel like they are one of the kind of mid-major teams or low majors that are going to have a really good chance to compete with these types of like opponents this season. And Iona, when you are looking at this team and how they performed in their first game against Hofstra, how can you not be impressed? I mean, Hofstra is a good team. Iona jumped out on them early, held onto that lead late and throughout the entire game. And although I do think that it can be a little bit testy in the early goings going on the road, I think when you have a team like a UMKC that doesn't foster a lot of fan support, this is going to feel a lot like a neutral site venue rather than a true road contest. And for that reason, I say we go ahead and lay the 3.5 points here for 2 units for our first bet here on Tuesday. For pick number 2, we are taking a look at a matchup here between Navy and Penn State. And although a lot of people are going to look at this game from an optics standpoint and say, hey, Penn State, the high major, 2-0, laying only 12.5 points against the Navy midshipmen who just got covered by this number last time out against Yale, why wouldn't we want to bet on Penn State? Well, I think there's a lot of things that are stacking up against Penn State in this game. One, I don't think that they have a very talented roster. And two, when you're looking at Navy on the other side, I actually think they have a very good roster, a very deep roster, and a veteran-heavy roster, despite the fact that they just kind of had a stinker last time out. And I really like betting on these types of mid-major teams who drop an early contest and have a chance for that redemption next time out. And for that reason, I say we go ahead and take the 12.5 points here for 2 units for our second bet here on Tuesday. For pick number 3, we are heading out to the state of Ohio, where we have a very fun in-state matchup here between Dayton and the Cincinnati Bearcats. And we have bet on both of these teams in the early going already, and we've cashed both of the bets that we placed on Dayton and Cincinnati respectively. But what I will say is, when you're looking at this spread of it being 7.5, I can definitively tell you that in terms of just the talent, the performance, how good I think these teams are going to be, 7.5 points is a larger margin than it should be. Now, part of that you have to contribute to, hey, this is going to be Dayton's first time going on a true road game this season. And although they might be a better team this year than last, how do they kind of, adapt to that adversity in the early goings? I think they could go a number of different ways, but same thing can kind of be said on the other side for Cincinnati here in terms of, hey, this is your first real opponent that you're taking on here. How are you going to perform with those expectations of defending your home court? And for that reason, I think taking the 7.5 points, more than 2 full possessions in this contest, is 100% the way to go. And I say we go ahead and bet on the Flyers confidently here, catching the 7.5 points for 3 units for our third bet here on Tuesday. For pick number 4, we are heading out to a really fun mid-major matchup here between Toledo and Wright State. And Toledo, oh my God, we bet on them on Saturday and they just absolutely imploded. It was a weird game because they were in control for most of the game, yet ended up losing by 12 against Marshall in the very end of things just because they couldn't hit a shot down the stretch. And what I will say is Toledo under Todd Kowalczyk will always be a very good roster, and sometimes in the early goings, they might have some growing pains and kind of figuring it out. And although they're 0-2, and a lot of people now might say, hey, I want to wait on backing Toledo, I don't think this is a good time. I actually think that this is a perfect time, especially going up against a team like a Wright State, where, I think we're kind of getting a discount price. And I think when you're looking at Toledo, I do think they win this game outright, but they're catching 4.5 points. I say we take them for 3 units for our fourth bet here on Tuesday. All right, next up, we are taking a look at a matchup here between UPenn and Providence. And when you're looking at this matchup here, one thing really stands out, and that is Providence under Kim English just hasn't been it. Obviously, when you're following in the footsteps of a guy like an Ed Cooley, you got some big shoes to fill, but I would have expected some kind of carryover from the Ed Cooley era that kind of bled into the Kim English era, and that just flat out has not been the case. And when you're looking at UPenn through the first 2 games in the Fran McCaffrey era, I've actually enjoyed how they've competed. I think they've been playing well offensively, and although they last time out against American is a decent roster for the mid-major level, and I do think that UPenn deserves a little bit of credit for how they performed in that spot. And in this game, Providence is laying 17.5 points. I don't see how they got there other than, hey, high major versus mid-major. Let's lay this kind of manufactured number that we always give the high major teams in these types of situations. And for that reason, I say we go ahead and take the 17.5 points here with UPenn for 3 units for our fifth bet here on Tuesday. For pick number 6, we are taking a look at a matchup here between Arkansas Pine Bluff and the Oklahoma Sooners. And when you're looking at Oklahoma, last time out, they went over to the Kennel and they got beat by Gonzaga. And it did end up being a double-digit game, but Oklahoma, I thought, honestly hung tough. And I do feel like this is going to be a team that is a drastically improved sort of team this season. And in this type of spot against Arkansas Pine Bluff, I think they need to show it. One, it kind of needs to be a bounce-back performance after you take an L. How do you respond? And also, I think from a talent advantage, from an athleticism standpoint, from a coaching standpoint, you sort of got to send a message in this game if you are going to be that kind of team this season. And for that reason, I say we go ahead and lay the 33.5 points here for 2 units for our 6th bet here on Tuesday. All right, next up, we are taking a look at a matchup here between Cal State Northridge and the North Dakota State Bison. And the Bison have won us a bet already and lost us a bet already during their West Coast road trip when they played Oregon State and UC Davis. And honestly, against UC Davis, although they lost that game, I did think they actually played rather respectably until kind of that back end of the second half. And I do feel like when you come back home and you had that sort of experience under your belt of hanging tough but not getting that W, all of a sudden you're more hungry than ever to get back home, get a win against a team that I honestly think you're a lot better than. And in this game, we're basically getting a pick'em with the North Dakota State Bison. Heck, we can actually offload a little bit of juice from just kind of a normal pick'em standpoint. And for that reason, I say we make this our biggest bet of the day and go on the money line with the Bison for 4 units for our 7th bet here on Tuesday. All right, next up, we are heading out to what probably amounts to the game of the night. It's in Louisville, Kentucky, and of course, it features Louisville, and it also features the Kentucky Wildcats. This is a very fun rivalry across a lot of different sports, and now that Louisville is back up on the map in terms of having a competent men's basketball roster, all of a sudden, this is a massive game in terms of the state, in terms of the rivalry, in terms of just non-con play, potentially bleeding over to, when games and seeds are decided. And I do think that when you're looking at how these last 3 matchups have gone in the favor of Kentucky, all of a sudden, Louisville at home and the KFC Yum Center are going to have some really motivated players on the court against a Kentucky team that I think actually may be a little bit up in the air in this first month of the season. And for that reason, I say we go ahead and lay the 3.5 points here with the Cardinal for 2 units for our second to last bet here on Tuesday. All right, for our final bet here on Tuesday, we are heading out to Dallas, Texas, where we have a matchup here between Murray State, another Kentucky team, taking on SMU. And I've been so damn impressed with Murray State in the early going, and I do think it's legit. And although SMU is sort of the high major team in this matchup with a lot of hype in terms of their coach, their offense, their players that they have on the roster via this NIL push that the program is making, Murray State is one of those kind of sneaky teams that, honestly, at this point, the way that they're playing, it wouldn't be an ultimate surprise if they end up winning the Missouri Valley Conference, in my opinion, or at least being in that mix, especially with Drake kind of looking shaky in the early goings. And I do think that 11.5 points here is a pretty egregious line, and it's more so based on perception of last year's results rather than what we see this year in the early going. And for that reason, I say we go ahead and take Murray State, catching the 11.5 points for 2 units for our final bet here on Tuesday. All that being said, I really want to thank you guys for checking out today's video. And if you do want to show some love, make sure you drop a like in this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and make sure you guys comment down below. But with all that being said, y'all, I will see you in a future video. Take it easy.